Welcome, everybody. My name is Tracy Trottier, and I'm the Global Customer Marketing Manager here at SolarWinds MSP. And I'll be your host today for the final session in our series, Making the Jump to Managed Services. Today, we're focusing on metrics, sales, and marketing and measurement. This is Robert Wilburn, our VP of Marketing here at SolarWinds. That's clearly not me. So why are we offering this course? It's about partnering with you, our partners, to make sure that we all are aligned with the right incentives, that we're doing the right things to support you. And as you grow, we grow right along with you. So this is really a win-win series for all of us. So I'm going to turn it over now to our leader for today. Dave, over to you.
Thank you. Yep, and welcome everybody. Again, this is just my quick bio, but since we've been talking now for this being the fourth week, I don't think I need to go too much over that. But there is my contact information, and I'll put it up at the very end too. You know, feel free to reach out in the future if you have any questions or thoughts or comments or whatever. I'm always out there and available, so happy to answer those questions for you out in the future. So we also have a guest today, another Dave, with the theme of Daves. So Dave Poole, if you want to just pop in and kind of give your bio real quick and introduce yourself, that would be cool, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I owned and operated a MSP for years, kind of grew it from a two-man break-fix shop into a 14-person formal managed service practice. I've actually, after that, went and built sales and marketing for a couple of other companies, transitioning to managed services or trying to build out managed services. Really have enjoyed doing that, and then made the switch to actually come over to now work for who my vendor was when I was an MSP. So I really enjoyed having SolarWinds as a partner, and now I enjoy returning that to our partners here. So I manage the solutions advisor team for North America here with SolarWinds. Thanks, Dave.
All right, we'll be coming back to Dave for kind of a little roundtable session here in a little bit. Always good to hear from Dave and kind of get his insight on some of the sales and marketing things, which I think is, you know, always a big question mark for MSPs. So we'll spend some time there. So again, just a reminder, you know, this isn't a webinar. It's not so much fun to just hear me kind of drone on. So I definitely would like to hear from you. I'd like you to, you know, unmute and talk when you have a question or want some clarification or discussion or whatever. So that's definitely important. Always good to see you as well if you'd like to turn on your camera. The session's being recorded, so we will send out a link. You'll be able to refer back to all four of the sessions. And so some of the data and things that we put up there that's maybe kind of small, it's there mostly so that when you go back to the recording, you can check all that stuff out. So no need to take in-depth notes if you don't want to. Okay, so again, we're in the fourth session. We're going to go over metrics, sales, and marketing, quarterly business reviews, and then also some driving efficiency tips as well. So that's today, and today marks our last session available or together. So, okay, so again, we're going to go over metrics. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of metrics that you can use throughout your business that work really well. And especially some key managed services metrics. We'll talk about those. Those are really important metrics, and using those as a motivator is really kind of a critical thing to learn, and I really think it sets apart the best-in-class managed service providers from the rest of the pack. Because, you know, it's kind of, without metrics, it's kind of like driving your car without a dashboard. You know, you don't know what speed you're going, you don't know how many RPMs your engine's revving, and it's just you're kind of driving by the seat of your pants, which is not really a good thing to be doing in business. And again, the sales and marketing piece, we'll talk about that. and then we'll go over some QBRs, and I will show you one of my favorites that I've made kind of generic from one of my clients. So we'll take a look at that as well. So first, how do we motivate staff? I mean, that's a huge thing. How do we get them kind of aligned with what we view as business owners as the right thing? How do we align managers? How do we align the staff below them, and so forth? So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to establish, what the right thing is to do, right? I mean, before we can get them or figure out a way to motivate them, we've got to establish what that right thing is. And I like this quote: "If you can't measure it, you can't improve it." So we need to find things that are not just theoretical, but that we can measure. And my opinion is that every employee in the company, and it doesn't matter whether they're technical, management, administrative, sales, whatever, every employee in the company should have 2 to 4 metrics that measure the outcome of a job well done. And this is important because a lot of people put in place metrics that are not so focused on outcomes. They're more focused on maybe the things they do throughout the day. I think that when you want to empower employees, you have to focus on what the end result looks like, figure out ways to measure those end results, and then focus your employee on those end results. So obviously all of the little details to get to the end are really critical, and we may do some work around that as well, but focusing them and rewarding them on that end result, I think, is most critical to having empowered employees. And again, those should be kind of big picture outcomes. If you, for example, if we look at, here's one of the big ones: getting your time in on a daily basis, or getting your time in as you're working on things. That's kind of the bane of most companies' existence. It's a real pain. Techs don't like to do it, but that's not necessarily a big picture outcome. That is certainly something that's very critical that we need them to do, but it's not kind of that end result that we're looking for that we really need to focus them on. Another thing, as you look at your metrics, if you're coming up with more than 4 metrics for a particular employee, again, these outcome metrics, not individual things, but outcome metrics, you probably have an employee that's wearing too many hats. And there's real problems with that. I mean, we talked a little bit about that, I think, in session 2. If you have too many things that are on your plate, you always have kind of a built-in excuse, right? If I'm doing professional services and managed services, if I'm not doing well with my tickets, I can always say, well, I had a lot of billable work and I had these projects that needed done. And if I'm not getting my projects done, I can always blame it on, well, we had a lot of managed services tickets. And, you don't want that sort of a situation where you've got things where you've kind of built in an excuse as to why a particular metric cannot be met. So if you're coming up with more than those 4 metrics, you definitely want to look at what responsibilities that employee has and whether there's ways to either, more organize that employee. We talked about that in session 2 about having different days responsible for different areas, or potentially move around responsibilities to other employees so that we have a more clear picture. And I would say this is most critical for technical employees. I think that those are the ones that really, if we don't boil their job down to just a few big picture outcomes, I think that's where we end up running into a lot of issues where the employee's not meeting or not living up to what our expectations are as the business owner. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments kind of about that whole line of thinking? Okay. So I'm a big believer in creating bonus programs to motivate. Years ago, when I owned my MSP, I looked at the salespeople and I thought, this is a great motivator. Commissions, giving salespeople commissions is a great motivator to getting them to do what you want to do and align them with what outcome you want as a business, which is more sales. I've found over the years that it works really, really well with technical employees, management, and even administrative type employees. I mean, pretty much anybody in a company, we can build a bonus program around and motivate them to be interested in the same things the business owner is. So once we have those metrics that we were just talking about to measure what the right outcomes are for a particular employee, my recommendation is to build a bonus around that, around those metrics. And I like a scenario where the employee can make more than market if they go above and beyond. So in other words, they're almost kind of building their own raise, so to speak. I use a term a lot I call the 80-30 principle. So if market price for that particular tier and skill level of employee is X, okay, that's 100%. I like to build a plan where their base is around 80% of that, but the bonus program is built in such a way that if they go above and beyond, they actually have the ability to make another 10% above that kind of market price for their job description. And if they're doing the right things, if they're meeting expectations, they're making 100% or kind of the same thing that they would make if you were just going to pay them a base salary. So when you do that, you create a situation where, again, the employee is rewarded for going above and beyond. They're able to kind of build their own bonus. And the other thing that's important is to tie those numbers back to the revenue the employee is responsible for. And so what that does is it gives us the ability to kind of grow their salary as the workload grows, right? So for example, managed services, which is I think probably the best example of this. If we tie their bonus to be a percentage of your billable, your managed services billable revenue, okay, then let's say you get another large help desk client, right? Let's say that it adds another $3,000 a month to your revenue. They're going to get a percentage of that $3,000. If they say to you, hey, we just don't have enough people, we need to add more people, which is kind of the common cry of technicians. When that happens, that pie, if we're paying out as a percentage of the revenue, that pie gets sliced into one more slice. And so what happens is everybody is getting a smaller slice of that pie. So if you think about it, as business owners, what we really want are to have our employees, be able to deal with as many devices, as many managed service agreements as possible without adding additional employees. If we create a bonus program that bonuses as a percentage like that, we're aligning their wants, which is to make a bigger bonus, with our wants, which is to not have to add additional headcount. So it really works well, and it also means that as they work harder because you've added more clients, they're being rewarded with a bigger bonus as part of that percentage. So for managed services, I recommend a percentage of managed services revenue. For professional services, I recommend a percentage of their own billable work. So if Johnny is one of your professional services engineers, I recommend that once they reach some minimum utilization level, they get a percentage of their billings. So if they really work hard and spend time, even if they work overtime, and they bill a lot more than say average, if they really knock it out of the park, then they're really going to get a nice bonus. And what have you done? You've been able to do more work with less employees. You've been able to do it more quickly so that you can move on to the next project. So again, your interest as business owner is aligned with that technician's interest as well. You know, that person, that your tech wants to get that project done. They don't want to kind of just slowly get the thing done. They don't want to draw out those hours because they will not get as big a bonus. So again, aligning those interests. Managers, I recommend some sort of a net profit share based on the area that they manage. So, for example, if you've got a dispatcher and they are, service manager, dispatcher, and they're managing the professional services team, and maybe they're managing also the help desk, then I recommend, looking at giving them a percentage of the profit generated by those two business units, because again, their interests become aligned with yours. If they add additional headcount because they need more people to work, that's going to decrease that profit coming out of that business unit, which means that it's going to decrease their bonus. If you don't have happy clients and they move to another MSP, their bonus goes down. So again, we're aligning their interest with your interest, and I think that's really critical. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on that? This has worked wonders. I mean, I once had one of my one of my clients who had, I think he had 5 employees, so he was rather small, but he kind of fought. He just had a lot of issues with having his people do the right things all the time. There was a lot of fires. And he was a sales-oriented owner, so he spent a lot of time selling and less time on working with his techs and so forth. And he was just really kind of beside himself. And we put in a bonus program like I just described, and within 3 months, it just completely changed how his people worked. They were much more self-sufficient. They did more self-management, and he called it a miracle. So he's definitely I've had him talk to some other people over the years because it was just such a quick change and quick turnaround just by putting in a good bonus program and where the employees were focused on what he needed them to be focused on, those outcomes. Okay, so I'm going to throw a whole bunch of metrics at you. Again, these are all in the recording, so if you don't want to write them down or whatever, that's fine. You can refer back to the recording. And if any of these are not clear, please let's stop and talk about it, because some of these, are math and sometimes it's hard to get that all in a presentation. So let's start with key financial metrics. So these are most useful for your management team typically. Anybody that's kind of in that management role looking at these kind of financial metrics. So my favorite is labor-loaded gross margin percentage. Labor-loaded gross margin is kind of a complicated calculation, but I find this to me is the speedometer that goes in your car. Without labor-loaded gross margin, I think it's very, very difficult to understand how fast your business is going and whether you're really, making progress in your business. And here's the math. So it's the monthly recurring revenue minus your bundled tools costs. So those would be things like antivirus. It would be monitoring tools, so your RMM costs. If you're bundling Office 365, that cost would be in there and so forth. Also, your PSA costs for any labor that is, directly related to managed services. So if you've got a managed service, if you've got, say, 3 managed service employees and they're dedicated to your managed services team, you would have the cost for the PSA for those 3 employees. So when we're talking about those bundled costs, it's all those direct costs that are required to deliver that managed services revenue. and then also subtracting the unburdened direct labor cost. Now, some companies, like service leadership, they don't use unburdened, they use more of a burdened direct labor cost. I don't, because I think that it's easier. It all works out the same. It just changes the percentages that are our targets. If we add taxes and so forth, it changes those percentages. But I typically, when I do this math, I typically do an unburdened direct labor cost. So it's your the payroll, any kind of bonuses and those things that are related to the people that are specifically working on managed services. Also, if let's say I've got that dispatcher service manager, right, some percentage of their labor costs need to go in there as well. So if you've got them and you pretty much evenly split them between managed services and professional services management, then 50% of their costs are going to go into this. And then we divide that by the MRR again to get that percentage. And that works really well for knowing how well we're performing in a particular area. And again, we do this by what I call business units. So managed services would be calculated as one calculation. Professional services would be a calculation. Product sales would be a calculation, which, by the way, that's one you already probably do, right? Product sales is pretty much your gross margin, because product sales typically doesn't have any labor associated with it. It's just the cost of the product typically. Cloud services, you may or may not have labor involved there, but again, it's probably more just cost. But if I calculate each one of those business units and I set targets by business units, which is going to vary, managed services is typically going to be your highest labor-loaded gross margin percentage. Your product sales, or depending on your mix, even potentially your cloud services, is going to be your lowest labor-loaded gross margin percentage. So it all kind of varies. By the way, the reason I say that about cloud is because typically, a lot of companies today are selling a lot of Microsoft 365. The margins are terrible, and so we see much lower margins a lot of times in cloud services than we used to, even 5 years ago. Does that make sense? Because this one is big. Labor-loaded gross margin is kind of like one of my secret weapons that I use in every one of my clients. I think it's really critical, and it's so much simpler to understand than just trying to look at a P&L and understand how you're doing as a business. So anybody have any questions about that labor-loaded gross margin? Okay. Another one, EHR, effective hourly rate. So that's going to be your managed services recurring revenue, monthly recurring revenue by client divided by the client hours used. So if you're billing a client $1,500 a month, you're going to take that $1,500 a month and you're going to divide it by the number of hours that you spent on that client, both doing reactive support and proactive support, and that's going to give you an EHR, an effective hourly rate. And then we can use that to rank our clients. So I use kind of an ABC method. So an A client is somebody that's using a lot fewer hours than kind of my average or target. My B clients are the ones that are clustered right around my target. And then my C clients are the ones that are outside my target, meaning my effective hourly rate is too low. And in the U.S., and this may or may not translate to some of our European guests, but we typically look for $125 an hour as our target effective hourly rate. So if they're clustered right around $125 an hour, I would consider that a B client. Let's say I've got a client who's at $200 an hour, which is not unusual. They would be an A client. And let's say I've got somebody at $70 an hour, that would be a C client. And by doing that, and not just doing it once, because you're going to have this kind of go up and down, but establishing a pattern, we know who our clients are that we need to look at closely for service delivery. So these are the clients that we really need to remediate that service delivery, look at what are the drivers around you know, a low effective hourly rate, and try to bring those C clients up to a B client or even an A client, and you know, kind of use that as a cycle. But that is a really good financial metric to use to look at how a particular client is in terms of how the financial performance of that is. And then finally, the other big one, which I think probably all of you are looking at, is net profit. I include the caveat of not including excess owner comp. I see this a lot, especially when we're talking about sole proprietors. So, you know, single-owned companies. You end up with kind of a lot of expenses in there, maybe that are you know, maybe not things that you would typically see in maybe a larger company. I call those excess owner comp. Sometimes your salary is maybe higher than it should be. All of those things are fine, but when we really want to look at net profit and compare your performance against your peers, what we want to do is remove that excess owner comp from the equation and just include a reasonable salary and reasonable expenses that if I were to come in and run your company for you, that's how much you would pay me, and that would be you know, in line with my expenses. So anything that's in excess of that, we like to have that pulled out so that we have a much better picture of net profit. So all of that just means you may not be able to just go to your P&L and look at the net profit and use that as your number. You may have to adjust, and I would say I probably have to adjust, you know, half or more of my clients, you know, adjust out that excess owner comp. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does that make sense? Sometimes I get the question of how do I figure out what a reasonable salary is. I usually recommend, you know, talking to other business owners in your area with similar sized companies and kind of get an idea of what their salaries look like. Maybe talk to your accountant or your CPA. They usually have a pretty good idea of kind of, for your size, what a reasonable owner's salary would look like. And I typically like to use that as kind of the number to establish what's excess. And again, I'm not telling you not to take a larger salary if you can afford it, but we definitely have to look at, when we look at the numbers, we have to compare apples to apples. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's now talk about some key MSP metrics. So first, managed endpoints per MSP tech. So, you know, that's a good metric. There's no magic answer to this one. This varies largely by MSP, not just because of their efficiency level, but also a lot of times their products that they sell, the kind of clients that they have will vary these the endpoint per tech number. But what we really have to do is establish, you know, what is your number, and then what is a good number. And maybe your number is a good number, maybe it's not, but establishing that allows us to measure the performance of our techs and how they're doing in terms of supporting our clients. Another one is percentage of tickets handled with automation. So that's a good measure of how well you're automating your issues. So we know, we kind of have established a baseline, and we know, you know, if we're doing better or worse than that baseline. Again, there is no magic number or magic metric that kind of translates to every MSP, but once we know where you are, how much automation you've done within your company, and what your percentage is, that helps us establish kind of that baseline for you. And then, you know, I'm doing better or worse than that baseline target that we've set. MSP revenue per MSP tech. So this is a somewhat financial metric that we can use to look at, you know, how much money we've got coming in versus our head count. So these three are kind of outcome-based metrics. Then we're going to get into more functional or comparative metrics here. I thought I had it on the same slide, but it's on the next slide. With the help desk. So the big one for help desk is CSAT. So what is my customer satisfaction score look like? And when we measure customer satisfaction, there's kind of two platforms that I think are the leaders in our industry, and there's various companies that kind of provide ways to do this, but these are kind of the two measurements that we see most in the industry. The first one is called the Net Promoter Score, or NPS. Hopefully most of you have kind of run across this at some point. But it's the idea, it's kind of a psychological proven idea that if you give somebody a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, and you ask them a question, a simple question such as, how likely are you to recommend our services to your friend, okay? Psychologically, if they select a 9 or a 10, that makes them a promoter, meaning they're likely to tell other people about you. If they're giving you a 7 or 8, they're probably not going to say much at all about you. And if they're giving you a 0 to 6, they're really a detractor, meaning they're not happy with the service. And so, and they've done a lot of studies around this. So this really is kind of a good tool to use to kind of get kind of in your clients' heads. Another even easier platform or way of measuring that probably most of you have seen are these kind of happy faces. Sometimes they do it with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So it's this idea of, are you happy with what you got? You click the green happy face. If you're neutral, you click the middle, and if you're unhappy, you click the red guy. And that works really well as well because it's quick and easy to answer, and that's really key. We don't want to be trying to measure customer satisfaction with a quiz. We want just a 2-second click and move on. Maybe give them the opportunity to provide feedback if they'd want. But if we use these two systems, one of these two systems, what that means is we're going to get a lot of response from our clients instead of just really hearing from the clients that are unhappy, which is typically what you get if you're asking for a lot of details. So measuring CSAT is really important, especially as you grow. When you're very small, it's kind of easy to keep your hands or contact with your clients and know how they feel. But as you grow, and you're doing hundreds and hundreds of tickets per day, it's really critical that you have a good system for measuring CSAT and that you're looking at that and you're paying attention to it. Another good help desk metric is mean time to resolution. So that's the average time that it takes to resolve a particular ticket. And so we look at that typically across a month a lot of times, or a week, so that we can see how are we doing against our target. And that's another example of one that is not that there's no magic right answer to what your mean time to resolution should be. But once you establish what you're comfortable with and what your clients are expecting, now if it goes above that, that you've got an issue. So you're always trying to target that average or below average. And if you're in a growth mode, this is really a critical metric because you need to know when you're slipping and your tickets are taking longer, because clients feel that pretty quickly when your MTTR starts to go up. And then the final really good help desk metric that I use is SLA adherence. So that's the percentage of time that the SLA was met. That SLA, and I think we talked about this in one of the previous sessions. The SLA that I recommend when you're measuring this, which is what I call the money SLA, is the time until you have an engineer working on the ticket. So that's really the only thing that, in my opinion, is in your control. You know, some people do the time to resolve the ticket, which, you know, I don't know how anybody promises that, and you know, the more difficult the problem, the longer it takes, and those difficult problems are usually the higher priority issues, the ones that are like server down, network down, and those are the ones that the client wants to see resolved more quickly, and those are the ones that we can't resolve more quickly typically. So the one that I suggest you use is time until an engineer starts working on the ticket. And measuring that as SLA adherence is kind of critical, because, again, as we bring on more clients, as we grow, as we have changes in staff, these numbers will tend to fluctuate. And if we aren't kind of watching those numbers, we don't know how well we're doing until the clients really start to complain. And usually clients don't start really complaining until things get really bad. So it's a lot of times really too late for you to correct course. Manage tickets per MSP tech. Again, I think we talked about that one a bit, or did we? No, I guess we didn't. So manage tickets per tech is the number of tickets that a particular tech works. It's good for comparing the performance of two techs in the same tier. So if you've got, say, 3 tier 1 techs, if we look at how many tickets each one is doing, if you've got 2 of your techs working 50 tickets, no, it's probably too high, 20 tickets a day, and you have another one that's only working 5 tickets per day, then you know that probably there's an issue with that tech that's only working 5 tickets per day. First touch by tech resolution percentage. So some companies use this to determine how often their technician, the technician that gets the ticket initially, is able to resolve that ticket. This is another one where there's really no magic number, like there's really no magic correct number, but we really want to measure that to kind of compare if that's something we're driving, if first touch resolution is something that we value and are driving for our clients. Ticket stability score, this is one I use a lot. And just so you know, I typically focus on CSAT, MTTR, SLA adherence, and then ticket stability score. Those are the biggies that I watch. So the ticket stability score is the number of days where tickets opened are equal to or less than the tickets closed divided by the total days. So what we're really looking at when we're looking at ticket stability is how often we're able to close as many tickets as are opened. Sometimes I talk about that as wins versus losses. So the days that we close the same number or more than the tickets open is a win day, and then the days where we close less than the tickets opened are losses. And so when we start to look at that, we can develop a percentage around that. And you need to look at that because we want to have, if we're selling predictability to the client, we want to have stability around how quickly we resolve tickets and how many tickets kind of sit out there. So we look for that number to be, to be very stable if we're doing the right things on our help desk. Does anybody have any questions about that? Some of those are a little bit esoteric and confusing. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Is anybody measuring any of these things that we just talked about in your own company already, on your own help desk? Have any comments about how that's going for you?
got your microphones unmuted rather. Please go ahead and just use the chat window and, type any of your questions in there. Both Dave and I are watching that, so we can make sure that your questions get asked. It's a very quiet group today.
I know. I worry that everybody's falling asleep.
Should we make everybody turn on their cameras and we could do some exercises?
Well, right about now, if we were in person, I would throw candy out.
Dave, I'm going to jump in and say that our company is not using key metrics to a great extent, and I feel the pain of that, just not, as you mentioned, really seeing where we're driving, how fast we're going, and how quickly the engine is turning over. So a lot of this information is very valuable. It's something we've been talking a lot about but haven't really done. So some great tools for us to use. So we'll be doing that in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah. Do you look at your P&L often, out of curiosity?
Yeah. So we're pretty familiar with the general financial situation, but drilling down into the metrics of per department, and actually focusing on how lucrative a customer is or not. That's a key concern for us as well, and really breaking that down. I like your ABC, and I can think of a handful of C's that maybe cause us more trouble than they're actually bringing in terms of dollars and cents.
Yeah, and those C clients, I'm big on, if you get to the point where you've worked with a C client and you're not able to kind of bring them up to a B client, when it's time to renew, you either got to change their pricing so that you make them a B because you're charging more, or you got to fire them because they are not making you money, and you're spending too much time on them. So.
Totally. I hate the thought of it, but it makes good business sense.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's that. I think I talked at one point about my egg basket analogy, where you've got these eggs in the basket. Well, some of them are rotten, and you need to throw them out. But when you have a limited number of eggs, that's really hard to throw them out. But you've just got to have the faith that you're going to replace those eggs with good, yummy, quality eggs and not rotten eggs.
Exactly, and there's one client keeping me up at night that I know is it's time to do something about it. So I'm feeling the motivation right now to get some numbers together for them.
Yeah, for sure. Mike says, we're not using metrics. We are currently not offering MSP programs. I do track billable hours per tech, as all work is billable. That's good. Do you measure the utilization percentage? I think I've got that one coming up on a slide for your billable. So how much time is billable versus how much time that employee worked in a particular month? You can just throw that in the chat window when you get a chance. Okay. So NOC metrics, so as a reminder, your NOC is doing your kind of proactive behind the scenes work. Monitoring coverage, so that's the idea that how many of the devices that you're managing have monitoring set up and installed and that you're working with. So hopefully that's 100% or very, very close to 100%. Patch coverage, so that's how many machines are up to date in their patch. We like to see, or we like to think that it's 100%. We always like to tell clients that, we're going to make sure that they're patched, but we all know if we start digging around in our RMM, we're probably going to find some machines that are not patched. So measuring that patch coverage, and again, that kind of fluctuates, right? So we get to Tuesday, Microsoft Tuesday patch. The next day, we've gone maybe from 99% patch coverage to 50% patch coverage or 30% patch coverage. And so that number may change, and we want to see that then come back up to 99% or 100%. So that's one that's critical for measuring in your NOC. Backup success rate, there again, not having backups run successfully is a problem. It drains labor. So we really want to see high backup success rate. I recommend that people use this also as a measure for how well your backup product is working, because there are products out there that work better than others, and knowing that backup success rate and having a history there, you can use that to decide, hey, maybe I need to change backup products because my success rate will go up, which will lower my labor rate, that I have to invest in that and make me more efficient. The self-heal percentage, so that's how often the RMM is able to resolve an issue automatically on its own. It's similar to that idea of automation. And then on to what I was just mentioning before, which is professional service, and that really, there's really only one metric in pro services, because we want our pro services people to bill. That is why they're there. That's why we've got them on staff, is to bill. And typically the number that we're looking for in most organizations is 70% or higher. So that means that 70% of the hours that are billable, that we're paying our billable tech, is billable to a client or higher. Good story. I had a gentleman that worked for me that I used to call him the king of billable utilization, and I had a bonus program that said, if you are 70% utilized or higher, I'm going to give you a percentage of your billable work. And I also had kind of a kicker, and I would not do this consistently, but I would put it on when we had times where we were kind of had a lot of work and a lot of things queued up, where we wanted to get things done. I would set a accelerator so that at 90% billable, they got an extra percentage of their billable utilization. Well, this person was just the king of this. I mean, he would work with our project manager to plan out his weeks to maximize his billable utilization, and he would typically run around 100% billable. Now, that doesn't mean that he was working, 20 hours worth of overtime a week. He was 100% billable with usually little to no overtime. And the way he did that was he was just very good about how he set up the work that he did, so that there was no waste, and that he was really able to focus on that billable work, and that he was able to, for example, we did flat rate server setups. So we would have 8 hours per server quoted to do server setups. Well, he would come up with ways to do 3 server setups simultaneously. So maybe that took him 14 hours to do all of that. But because he was doing it simultaneously, he was much more efficient. So he was able to do 24 hours worth of billable work in 14 hours. So we have, let me get rid of that. It went all the way on its own. So, it is possible, and, there are ways for people to really be billable in what they're doing, and really maximize that billable utilization without having a negative impact on the services that they're doing, that work that they're doing. Anybody have any thoughts or questions around that? Mike, you were talking about that whole utilization thing. You have any? You know what your number is as a percentage?
No, I haven't looked at it as a percentage. I generally expect 25 billable hours from each tech per week. And we have some better, some don't meet that. But I need to get everybody at least up to 25, which is close to 70%. I do the calculation on that. On a 40 hour week,
so that's 63.
So I think I'm close on what my expectation is, but I do need to start paying attention to that on a weekly, monthly basis better. Our business is really down this year, so it's been hard for people to meet that. It was a down year to start with. January and February were not as good as last year on average, and then before COVID has knocked us backwards some also.
Yeah, and that the COVID thing has caused a crimp in pretty much everybody's professional services area. So we're seeing that across the board, and so that's a bit of an oddity. The nice thing is, when you've got this bonus built in, you're essentially all sharing in the pain too. Now, obviously, that's not going to make your employees happy, but they're not going to get the bonus potentially that they're used to when you're not billing. And from a business perspective, that's really good. They're focused on the same things. They're sharing in your pain, and they're out hopefully looking for opportunities for billable work because they want that. Your number that you gave me, that's 63%. So I would say that 70% is the minimum. And the funny thing about that is that almost every one of the clients, when I engage with them and we start looking at billable utilization, it's always much lower than 70%. Usually 40, 50, 60%. And so when I say it should be 70% or higher, they look at me and like, there's no way we're ever going to get to that point. But when you start paying your employees a percentage of their billable work, it's like a miracle. Like all of a sudden, they're just billing machines for the most part, and it works really, really well. But you got to give them a reasonable percentage too. Like 1% or 0.5% is not enough.
Yeah, what we have been doing is we pay employees a small base salary plus a certain dollar amount per billable hour, which a lot of help in driving up the amount of billable hours that they do, and I think it does in some cases. I think people have kind of gotten complacent with that, I suppose. And maybe, like you're saying, when they exceed the expectation, we pay them more. Maybe adjust our salaries or the compensation structure somewhat to where, if you're hitting the 70%, you're making a certain amount per billable hour. Over that, you make more per hour for that work.
Yeah.
That comes to mind. But what I'm trying to do is use this future where I've got some extra time to really put together an MSP program and start selling ourselves as an MSP. Understand it's hard to convert existing clients, so we'll be working, with them the same as we always have for quite some time. Maybe just some switch that you can't. But I'm trying to institute that type of program with the recurring monthly revenue rather than just billing customers by the hour.
Yep. Well, and that makes it much safer and fixes a lot of your revenue issues too. So that's absolutely important. But you're always going to have professional services. So there's no, there's no way to get out of professional services, because if you have, and occasionally I run into managed service providers that have very little professional, it's because they've given away the farm in their managed services offering. They've given away too much, which is not a good thing. So, definitely, it sounds like in your model, you should definitely be looking at maybe a kicker, so they get to 70% and they get more. Because if you think about it, as long as the work is there to be done, which sounds like right now it may not be, but if the work is there to be done, you're forcing them to be more efficient. And as you shift, by the way, to managed services, some of those employees are going to move over to managed services. And you want those employees that are really efficient at billable to stay in the billable side of the house. So now might be a good time to at least kind of put that out there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, great. Okay, so sales and marketing. We're going to have a conversation about sales and marketing. We're going to bring back Dave, and we'll have a Dave and Dave conversation here.
Have to have a road show, the Dave and Dave show.
I know. And the last week we had Dave as well, so we got Dave and Dave after over 2 weeks. Everybody's sick of that thing.
I'm not using my video. I've had a little bit of internet here and there, and I don't want to lose connectivity, so I apologize.
That's all right. Yeah, I've had some internet issues as well. It sounds like it's been working okay today, but I was a little bit worried about that myself. So, yeah, so let's just talk about some things. So how did you market and sell your existing break fix clients? So that's exactly what we were just talking about with Mike. That shift between from having them be billable per hour over into the managed services arena.
Well, one thing I wanted to kind of go back to was something that you brought up on the metrics of mean time to resolve versus mean time to respond. And I will say that conversation is very strong into leading toward a transition to managed services, because you do encounter customers like, well, I need you to tell me when you're going to resolve it. Like, I need you to, like, when I have an issue, I need it handled. Like, it costs me money. So if a customer says that, then you can say, well, the only way to reduce that time is to have proactive maintenance and monitoring. And you actually have a customer asking you for managed services. But that's one thing, like a dialogue into selling your existing customer base. And your existing customer base is going to be your most, there's a lot of profit there rather than just finding, net new customers and trying to sell them new. You have a lot of profit available to you with your existing customers. One thing I had success with was stepping them into it, but also having a business-to-business conversation. One thing is, like, I talk to MSPs all the time. They're like, well, I'm not that strong in sales. Well, you've sold and you have customers, so you're good at sales. You are running a business, and you're running a small business, and your customers are running a small business. So lots of times there's a personal relationship and an ability to have a person-to-person conversation and a business-to-business conversation. So having a one-to-one conversation with that business owner and saying, here's what's happening in the market, and here's what's happening with my business. And I literally told all of my customers that I could not maintain a business without doing managed services. I couldn't manage the ebbs and flows and the, 1 month I have a lot of revenue coming in, the next month I don't, because it's all based on when stuff breaks. And having that conversation of, like, I don't want the ebbs and flows and the peaks and valleys of revenue that I can't predict. Your accounting department doesn't like the fact that they don't write checks to us for 2 months, and then 1 month they write more checks than they had budgeted for. So understand that this type of model is unsustainable as a business. I can't do it. Also, I would guess that you don't really want that either. And, get the head nods and have that conversation. Say, here's how managed services work. Here's your plan. And this is what we're going to do moving forward. And having the wherewithal to say, yeah, and not letting your customer push back. Say, well, I don't think we're ready for that. Well, okay. So I actually went out and found a break fix guy that was a pretty good guy, had a very good reputation. He was booked up left and right because he was one guy. He only did break fix, and he had a ton of customers. And I would say, here's the number of the guy that will do break fix work for you. Understand he handles a lot of customers in this county and the surrounding counties, and it might be 2 to 3 days before you get a response, but he'll be able to take care of you. And their immediate thing is 2 to 3 days. I'm like, yes, that's what break fix is. Managed services is proactive with 24/7 support. If that's what you need, here's the quote. And I actually was overwhelmed. You talked about earlier about moving C's into B's. I actually had 20 customers that I was so excited when I gave them the proposal that they were going to leave and I would never have to see them again. Guess what? Guess what? None of them argued. They all paid. They're like, okay, cool. And it was a massive increase in price. And a lot of times, and one thing I learned, and one thing I would give advice when talking about sales, is we buy in so much into our customers saying they won't spend more money. They're just trying to negotiate the lowest dollar they can for their business, as they do with all their vendors. But understand, if you actually sit down and say, Mr. Customer, this is the way it is, and you tell them, no, I don't do it any other way anymore, If you're doing a good job, they like you and they want to retain you, they will pay you the more money. Happens all day long. It surprises. I, to this day, consult MSPs on sales, and I tell them to do it, and they call me back and say, I can't believe it. My customer's paying me 20% more just because I told them this is how much it is now.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because they until you show them that predictability directly impacts their business, which means that you're not necessarily, falling all over yourself to come fix their problem at on a billable hourly rate or a billable hourly arrangement. That's really the only way to prove that's really critical to their business. And those are the clients that are really good fits for managed services. If they can live with outages for days on end, they're probably not a good fit.
Right. I believe we had a question. I heard audio come in. I
actually do have a question. I was wondering if these were clients that you were converting from break fix to managed services, or if this is someone who was looking to retain your services who had not used you before, and then you sold them on managed services versus a break fix relationship, which they were expecting.
Great question. So I was answering the question, which was, how did I convert break fix customers into managed services? So this conversation pertains to when I had my existing customer base and I went out and said, we now do managed services. Here's managed services in that conversation. But definitely to pivot, as you go in, you're actually going to gain new customers. Understanding what's important in your customer base. Do you have a vertical? Are you dealing with medical where there's concerns related to that business? Are you dealing with law firms where they have their concerns? So understanding where the hot points are so that you can hit on that and making sure that your service delivery is in line with their needs. So if you can build a model that's in line to what you're going after and you sit down with that customer and you talk about that predictability. I mean, Dave hit the nail on the head, predictability. Like, not worried about, hey, we can save you money. Like, right. Managed services isn't about saving money. It's about predictability. So would you like your invoicing to be the same every month? Would you like to reduce the downtime? I had a customer that they said, here's how much money downtime costs me every 15 minutes. Okay, so how much is it worth to mitigate that downtime? And understanding different businesses have different ways of looking at that and they see value in different ways. So when you're gaining that net new customer, you need to be able to speak to the value that's, that they'll listen to. And not getting overly technical. These are business people. Sometimes they're good business people. Sometimes they're not. I dealt with a lot of physicians in my business that were not good business people. But, they understood risk. They understood HIPAA. They understood data breach. So, mitigating those factors that are important to them is what you have to hit on when you're selling. Is there any question you have that's true? Is there any question you have that maybe relates to your business on what you're trying to answer, or maybe shift in how you go at sales? I'm happy to answer anything. We have a small group here.
Yeah, I was just asking about the whether, because I struggle with the managed services. A lot of people are looking for break fix and how to align them with wanting managed services versus break fix.
So one thing that's really important as you sell customers is, look, these customers don't know IT, so a lot of times they don't know what they don't know, and they don't really know what they actually want. So speaking to the customer and saying, great, you're looking for break fix. Like, not immediately saying, let me tell you about managed services. No, I told you I want break fix. So let me ask you something. Why are you looking for this type of IT support? And it may be like, well, we're looking to be the most cost effective we can. Okay. So IT isn't important for your business. Well, no, we can't run without our computers. Okay. And digging into where the needs are, and then actually finding, okay, so you're telling me IT is very important. Okay. But you obviously don't have any security concerns, and data breaches aren't a concern to you. Oh my goodness, no, we have IP. Oh, okay, so security is important too. Got it. We just need to handle that on a break fix model. Yes. Okay, so IT is important. So if a customer can't work for a couple of days, it doesn't cost you any money, right? Oh gosh, no. I mean, all my employees are vital. We only have 10 employees, and each one of them is, very vital to the revenue of the business. So a lot of times you'll find that customers are just looking for a cost-effective approach to IT, but you need to uncover where their concerns are as a business, and then say, okay, look, I appreciate you asking for, this break fix model, but you just told me this, and this. The only way I can support that is with this type of service agreement. And let me tell you why. And actually having that conversation and saying, this service answers this question, this service answers this question, this service answers this question. Now let's make it cost effective. And let's make it predictable. And if you have the person that pays the bills or does accounting in the room, say, would you like paying a bill of $5,000 one month and nothing for 4 months and then getting another bill? No, we hate that. Okay. Nobody likes that. But you know as well as I do, in the real world, what they're trying to get to is they're trying to get to zero. They're trying to figure out, how in the world do I pay nothing for IT? That's typically
That's the
what
holy grail. That's the holy grail right there.
It's just like with a customer that you start talking about security solutions. I used to have these conversations all the time with customers talking about security. I want to be as secure as possible. Great, disconnect from the internet. Well, I can't do that. Okay, now let's start talking about reasonable ways, and let's start talking about balance between a budget. Like, there's no way to get to zero, so let's solve your problem. I hope that helps. I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yes, thank you.
But now looking at the screen here, how best to find new managed service customers. Oh gosh, and then the next one is awesome. And I got off on a tangent there. I hope I'm good on time.
Well, no, you're fine. But I think we did talk about some of this, so that's why I kind of throw this other question up too. I mean, how do you? We talked a little bit about how to find new managed clients, and then one of the things that you are big on is kind of that ideal customer and painting the picture around what that ideal customer looks like.
So the ideal customer, I see a lot of MSPs make a mistake with that, because they have this pie in the sky customer that they don't currently have and they don't currently support, but they really want. And, the question is, well, if you don't have a customer like that, how do you know that's your ideal customer? Well, I just know that, we're building this managed services, and this is the type of customer that fits that model. What I say is, look at your existing base and look at who you currently have that is your best customer. Typically, you'll find your ideal customer in your existing customer base, and you may even have a few of them. And once you can identify that, you can really understand your metrics around how to do your financial modeling, so you can actually price it out and profitability. You can go and just say, hey, this customer is my ideal customer. Let me go find 20 more just like them. And then once you find that ideal customer, that goes back to answering the second question, was how to find new managed service customers. Find ways to market to that ideal customer, and only to that ideal customer. I am a big proponent of spending money on marketing. I grew my business through marketing. Sales is actually really easy when you're marketing to your ideal customer, and you're only speaking to customers that want services and are your ideal customer. So once you've established that, find ways Yeah, find ways to market specifically to that ideal customer. And if you don't have the budget to market to that ideal customer, work your way up to it. Don't market to the wrong customers because it's what fits in your budget. Wait until you have the budget to market to your ideal customer.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I hadn't really even thought about that. So, so how, so once you've got that ideal customer identified and you kind of know who they are, I guess then that leads you to what are some good ways to do that? Is Facebook the answer these days? Is LinkedIn the answer? Is, Twitter, Instagram?
So I think all those avenues are great additions to a good strategy. So a lot of people say, I'm going to market on Facebook and that's all I'm going to do. Well, if your ideal customer happens to be in that space, hey, that may be what you need to do. If your ideal customer is on LinkedIn, that's a great thing to do. I will tell you one thing, you got to understand who is on these social media platforms and what they're doing on them. Is your ideal customer going to respond to the message on that platform? One thing you understand, a lot of times, if you have a successful business, you're like, I'm trying to market to the CEO of a manufacturing company that does $20 million, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Is that CEO out there searching for managed services? No. His operations manager or his office manager is. So you need to understand, okay, that's my ideal customer, but my ideal prospect within that customer is Susie behind the front desk, not Bob, the CEO. Bob is who I'm going to sell to, but Susie is who I'm going to market to. Because Susie is the one that's on the internet searching for managed service providers. She doesn't even have a LinkedIn profile. And she's only on Facebook to look at her grandkids. So spending money to market on LinkedIn and Facebook to get to her when what she's doing is Googling is the wrong way to go about it. So you really need to understand who your ideal customer is and then who within your ideal customer is searching for your services.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you think a lot of times SEO might be the way to go?
So SEO can be the way to go. So I believe when it comes to web marketing, there becomes a little bit of a balance, and there becomes a game of, okay, do I invest in SEO or do I invest in AdWords? So one thing with my business, the size and target of our customer base is very much aligned to the previous statement about Susie behind the desk. But we found that our competitors, we were in a rather competitive space in a major market with competitors that had SEO teams on staff or were contracted with very high profile agencies. We found really quickly that we could not afford to compete in the SEO landscape with these companies. So it actually was more cost effective for us to go with the AdWords and just skip the whole SEO.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just pay for clicks. Let's get them there, because I'm not going to spend a fortune competing against guys with 20 times the budgets I do for SEO. So a lot of that not just becomes, once you identify who your ideal customer is, understand who your competitors are. Because when it comes to marketing, you really need to understand what your competitors are doing, how they're marketing, and what they're doing that either you need to do better or you need to do that maybe goes one step beyond or does it in a different approach so you can get around them.
Somebody didn't probably dig deep in this topic, but they said, but target Susie, she is in with She is different to Susie. She is different than Susie. That is not the interest of us.
How do I get? How can I target Susie? She is in with way different.
Who's way is different than sister. How do you get to Susie? I mean that's pretty deep. There's like if you're doing Facebook marketing and so forth, there's a lot of tools to help you slice and dice the eyeballs in Facebook. Facebook is tough because most people aren't there to even really pay attention to the business. They're there to get away from business and look at their look at the
Hey,
their buddies.
Dave, I'm going to make a little plug here for something. Excuse me. SolarWinds MSP is launching Market Builder. We're in the pilot phase right now, and Market Builder is our tool that we're offering to some of our MSP partners that will help them with their marketing. So we've created series of emails, sales scripts, presentations, social media posts, all sorts of collateral and ads that they can use to white label to help in their marketing.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Market Builder is going to be fantastic. And one thing to kind of reiterate on that is as you look at leveraging Market Builder and everything else that you're doing, look, if you're trying to figure out what works, sometimes the good thing to do is do a lot of everything. But make sure you ask your customers how they found you. Make note of what's working. If you go to 10 meetings and 9 out of 10 say they saw a Facebook ad, I would spend all of my time and energy and money on Facebook ads. If a customer says, well, we Googled you, and 9 out of 10 say Googled you, I would spend all my time and energy on that. So, and go to your existing customers. Maybe you've had them for a long time, or anybody in the last couple of years, ask them, how did you, if you don't know, find out how they found you, how they engaged with you initially. What was the first point in which they found out about you? If all your customers come through referrals or through network organizations, like right now I'm wearing a HIMSS shirt because when I was in Georgia, I was part of that organization, because if you're dealing with healthcare, you need to be in HIMSS. If you're part of legal, you need to put a part. So you may find that all your customers come through referrals of associations. Spend most of your time and energy in that, through that method. So it's really important to understand what's working. And if something works, don't spend money on something else. And if something's not working, don't keep spending money on it. Like, make sure you're actually managing and monitoring. I mean, just like the metrics in your business, manage and monitor the metrics of what you're doing in sales and marketing. Just as important.
So the follow-up to the Susie question is, I understand how I can target the CEO, but not how I can target Susie.
So again, it's going to depend on who Susie is. So I will tell you this, 9 times out of 10, the office manager who sits at the desk and if the boss tells Susie to find a managed service company or an IT service company, she is going to go to Google. No matter, even if someone has referred someone to her, or she was in a meeting of, multiple office managers and they said, hey, you ought to use Bob's IT company. 2 months later, she's forgotten that conversation. All she knows is the CEO came and said, Susie, find me an IT company. She has an immediate need. She's going to look now, and the person that she finds, she's going to call. So that's really important. Like the Susie situation, 9 times out of 10, it's an immediate search because she has been told to find someone immediately. That's where proper marketing and proper lead generation comes into, is making sure that you're in front of your ideal customer when they have a need. It's very hard to do. and it can be very expensive. So again, you need to understand how to strategically target your ideal customer and understand, okay, how many of them do I want? Like, what's my growth strategy? Do I want 1 new customer a month? Do I want 10 new customers a month? Do I want to double in size? And just so you know, I use this strategy. I doubled in size every year for almost 5 years straight before I sold. So it works.
Yeah, you just have to understand.
You just have to understand how, how much you want to do. But again, look, everybody's different. Every market's different. So you need to understand, are you in a rural market? Are you in an urban market? Are you in the north? Or are you in the south? Are you East Coast, West Coast? What's your vertical? All these pieces are very important. I mean, this isn't something that I can answer and give you the magic bullet that's going to work 100% of the time, but it's very important to understand all those key points and figure out how to put it together into a strategy that's going to work for you. But my biggest advice is, number one, identify that ideal customer. Only go after that ideal customer. The great thing is as you search for that ideal customer, you'll find a few others. Also, you'll do probably what you're already doing, which is getting some referrals. You'll invest in your chamber, some other organizations, and you'll find deals through that. But your marketing spend needs to be after that ideal customer that's profitable. And the great thing about your ideal customer, they're generally a lot more profitable than your other customers. Sometimes 10, 20%.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I hate to cut you off because this is a great conversation, but I do want to get to the QBRs, and we're like down to 5 minutes. So Dave, awesome conversation. Hopefully everybody got a lot out of that. I know that there's, I'm sure, some questions still left out there. I think people can probably reach out to Tracy and get to you, right? If they have some particular questions.
Oh, Tracy knows how to get me. That's right.
All right. Thanks for joining us today, Dave. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks, guys.
Okay, we're going to zip through and just go on to QBRs to demonstrate value. So this is the idea that on a quarterly basis, we're going to try and show value to our clients by having these meetings. Just a couple of quick tips. We don't want it to become too technical. They hired you to become the tech, or to handle the tech. So what we're really trying to do is demonstrate what we did for the client as part of that quarterly business review meeting with our clients. We also don't want it to become too salesy. Those sales opportunities are just going to come out of that on their own. We don't want to make it a big sales pitch. But we should be covering the users that are covered under our agreement and the assets that we're managing, a summary of our help desk stats for that particular client, any kind of security-related issues and info, because that's what a lot of our clients are really tuned into. So, when we're blocking viruses, results of the dark web scans, those kinds of things are really useful to have. Any issues that happened during the quarter, so if you had a poor CSAT response, if you missed SLAs, if you've got stale tickets, those things should come out during those meetings. You should not be trying to hide those things. You should go at those things, right head on, because a lot of times, especially if you're meeting with the CEO, they may have heard about some of these poor CSAT things, maybe an employee that wasn't happy. So if you go in and just address it and talk about it, you're going to head off what could be a very confrontational conversation. And then upcoming projects, budget planning, and recommendations, and that's kind of where this sales piece will flow out of. So let me just quickly show you kind of one of the best QBR documents. And they build this for the client every month or every quarter. Sorry, they use in this case they use BrightGauge to build a lot of this. So they kind of have an executive summary. They go through open requests, who the contacts are. That comes out of their PSA. This comes out of their Active Directory. This comes out of their monitoring tools. So what are the assets, cloud servers, virtual servers, devices that are managed, monitored workstations. By the way, you see that they're highlighting machines that need upgraded. They still have Windows 7. So that's where that kind of sales thing just kind of flows from. There's some expired updates that need to be talked about, again, in the renewals section. Then they talk about the overviews of their tickets. So what's the CSAT score? What's the mean time to resolution? What's the SLA adherence for each one of these areas? You know, that you can see that the priority 3 was 94%, but it was only one ticket missed. So again, you hit those things head on. How the tickets broke out by priority. So how many tickets are routine, how many are medium, how many are high, critical. Again, any bad CSAT reactions, they're going over. Any stale tickets, so those are the ones that have not been responded. Who are the people that are submitting tickets? So who are our maybe problem child, problem children, backups, endpoints, infected, those kinds of things. So you can see that this is really kind of going over all of these things, and sales will flow from that. So let's just go back to, if I can minimize this. And I think that's pretty much it. I know we wanted, if you'd like to give us any feedback, I know we're kind of at the end of our time here, but if there was anything that that you think we could improve, that you'd like to tell us about, that would be really awesome at this point. Anybody have anything? Anything they'd like to see in a future session? Okay, I'll take that as it was phenomenal. You can mark that down, Trace.
Yep, I got it.
Mark Allison here. I just wanted to say, this has been, some webinars come and go, and they may or may not have value, but found every single one of these to be very meaty and very, very valuable. And I'm going to be taking all 4 of these and sharing them with our senior team to give us perspective on what is important to build an MSP and put us all on the same page. So I'd like to say a big thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for the kind words, and I'm glad that we could help your business. I mean, that's obviously what our goal is here by doing these sessions. And again, there's my contact information, phone number, email address. You're welcome to reach out if you'd like, and I'll be there and answer your questions if you have any. And other than that, I appreciate everybody sticking with us for 4 weeks. I know that's a big investment of time, but I'm hoping it helps your business as we go forward.
Thanks, everybody.